Hey there, I'm Julia, and I've just hit the 42-year milestone. Ever since I can remember, working and earning my way has been a dream of mine. I've always yearned for independence, and thankfully I've managed to carve out that path for myself. From the moment I stepped into the professional world, being smart with money and seeking opportunities to grow financially were my top priorities. This drive didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's a value deeply rooted in my upbringing. My mom always stressed the importance of financial independence, especially as I ventured out to chase my dreams in corporate strategy analysis. Meeting my husband, Albert, was like a breath of fresh air. He's the kindest soul you could ever meet. However, I can't say I received the same warmth from my in-laws. Against all odds, and despite the lack of love from my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and mother-in-law, Albert and I tied the knot. It's been 12 years now, and like any couple, we've experienced our share of highs and lows. Recently, though, I've felt a chill from Albert, and I can't help but think it's linked to some major news we received a few months back. I remember that day vividly. I had just come home from work, bursting with excitement over some fantastic news. As I stepped into the kitchen, Albert greeted me. "Hey, babe," he said. "Hey, honey," I replied, my voice bubbling with joy. "Guess what happened today?" His curiosity was piqued, and Albert urged me to share the news. And so I told him about the promotion I received at work, unable to contain my excitement and breaking into our signature happy dance. This dance isn't just any dance. It's a special tradition we've nurtured over our 12-year marriage, celebrating our happiest moments together, from our graduations and engagement party to our wedding and the news of our pregnancy. But as my dance wound down, I noticed Albert wasn't joining in. Confused and a tad disheartened, I asked him why he wasn't partaking in our happy dance. He sighed, a mix of disappointment and frustration in his voice, yet managed to muster, "I'm happy for you, babe." This response, unlike his usual enthusiastic participation, left me puzzled and contemplating the deeper issues possibly at play in our relationship. But Albert had his news to share that day, news that was far from good. "I got laid off," he said, his voice low, his head dropping in what seemed like a mix of sadness and shame. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence so thick it felt like you could slice through it. I was at a loss for words, suddenly feeling guilty for my earlier excitement. My good news must have felt like rubbing salt in his wounds. "I'm so sorry, Albert. This is just heartbreaking," I said, trying to offer some comfort. "Yeah, well, that's life, isn't it?" he replied, trying to shrug it off. "They couldn't do anything about it. How about we go out tonight? Some meals might cheer you up." But Albert wasn't up for it. "I appreciate it, Julia, but I'm not really in the mood. I think I need some time alone. Congratulations, by the way," he added, making an effort to acknowledge my promotion. The following days were less tense, but a sense of discomfort lingered. It was clear that resentment was building up between us. Given the situation, it wasn't surprising that Albert might feel envious. He has always been somewhat traditional, preferring to be the sole breadwinner while envisioning a spouse dedicated to home care. However, that kind of lifestyle wasn't feasible for us, especially since we prioritized our children's education with private schooling. Plus, I've always believed in earning one's keep and achieving financial independence, values deeply ingrained in me since childhood. With my recent promotion, I was moving closer to securing a comfortable future for us. Albert's job loss remained a delicate topic. As he spent his days in a slump, neglecting house chores and diving into documentaries and video games, I chose patience over confrontation. When a month passed without much change in his demeanor, even the visits from my in-laws, whom I've never been fond of, were tolerated. I set aside my discomfort to provide Albert the support and care he needed from his family. "It breaks my heart to see you this way, big bro," said one of them during a visit that brought my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and mother-in-law all under our roof at the same time. Their presence tripled the tension, filling our home with a challenging atmosphere. I braced myself for their critical and snide remarks, all in the hope that their presence might offer Albert the solace he needed during this rough patch. To say I was taken aback by Roy's comment would be an understatement. "I'm shocked you were the one to get laid off. Honestly, I would have thought Julia would be in that spot before you," he said, leaving me bewildered by his outdated views. You know, it seems more common for women to face layoffs, considering they're usually the ones at home with the kids and all. Why would it happen to you first? Before I could challenge Roy's misguided thoughts, my loud mother-in-law burst into the room, her arms laden with food and drinks for Albert. The level of attention she lavished on him could make anyone think he was gravely injured, not just unemployed. "Oh, my poor baby, this is just devastating. I'm so upset," she exclaimed as if on the verge of tears. "It's a tough time, but I'm not at the brink of death, at least. Julia's been a huge support," Albert managed to say, attempting to lighten the mood. The room was filled with a mix of surprise and mockery. "A wife supporting her husband? What has the world come to?" someone quipped, clearly echoing Albert's traditional beliefs. When Julia suggested, "Maybe it's time to get dinner ready. We'll be here a while," I felt a mix of frustration and exhaustion. I had just endured an extra long day at work, pushing myself to avoid any hint of slack after my recent promotion. The last thing we needed was another job loss in the family, so I always aimed to excel in my role. But this often meant coming home drained, still facing the expectation to cook, especially since Albert's layoff had left him in a low state, relying heavily on me for support. There were days I hoped for the comfort of a prepared meal upon arriving home. I gently asked Albert if he could manage dinner before I got back, hoping for a bit of relief on those particularly demanding days. Sometimes he agreed, but often the result was less than stellar, which was surprising given his culinary skills before his job loss. Cooking for a crowd was the last thing on my mind, especially since it was usually just Albert and me. And thankfully, our kids were staying with friends, easing the dinner burden slightly. Exhausted, I suggested an alternative. "I'm quite tired from work lately. How about we order in? There's a fantastic place that does amazing noodles." The proposal seemed to shock my sister-in-law and mother-in-law, their gasps theatrical, but I stood firm, hoping for a simpler solution to the evening's meal, one that could offer a break from the tension and the day's fatigue. As I suggested ordering food, my brother-in-law simply shook his head, a clear sign of disapproval, while Albert stayed silent, offering no support. The reaction from the room was swift and harsh. "How could you, Julia? We're your guests. We hardly ever visit because we're never invited, and this is the reception we get?" my sister-in-law exclaimed, visibly upset at the idea of not being served a home-cooked meal. "It's not like we asked for a banquet, and honestly, noodles just doesn't sound appealing," my mother-in-law chimed in, lamenting the loss of traditional values. "This younger generation's ideas are spreading, even affecting us. Julia, we understand you're busy and tired, but Albert is going through a tough time. As his wife, shouldn't you at least make us dinner?" Feeling cornered by their demands and to avoid further conflict, I conceded, despite my exhaustion. "I understand your family, not strangers I need to impress. But seeing as this is so important to you, I'll make dinner. Please be patient, as it might take me a while due to how tired I am." Just as I was about to start preparing the dreaded meal for my critical in-laws, Albert finally spoke up, his words taking me by surprise. "She's been forcing me to cook dinner," he revealed, causing a dramatic reaction. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were so shocked you'd think they could hardly breathe. Roy's disapproval was palpable, his look of disgust unmistakable. "She did what? How could you, Julia? That's so selfish of you," my brother-in-law accused, making me question my actions. Was I the villain in their eyes? It seemed so, as they berated me for supposedly forcing Albert to share household responsibilities, even though it was only on days when I was utterly spent from work. "I'm sorry, Julia. I didn't mean to make you out to be the bad guy," Albert added, though his words only fueled the fire. "But it seems unfair to burden me with chores given our roles," he said, echoing the antiquated beliefs that seemed to govern their expectations of marital duties. Caught in a whirlwind of criticism for simply wanting a fair share of household responsibilities, especially during such exhausting times, I found myself apologizing for seeking some semblance of balance in our partnership. Hearing the tremble in Albert's voice as he concluded his thoughts, my heart softened. It was evident he was grappling with a deep sense of loss and confusion. Depression is a heavy cloak that can immobilize even the strongest individuals, leaving them stranded in a sea of hopelessness. Perhaps Albert was in such a grip of despair that even the simplest tasks felt Herculean. With this realization, I chose to approach the situation with more empathy. "I'm so sorry, Albert. From now on, let me handle dinner and everything else. You don't need to worry about it," I assured him, swallowing my frustrations. In the kitchen, I prepared the meal, serving it to everyone once ready. The dinner table was lively with conversation among Albert, Abigail, Roy, and Brittany, but I was left out. My silence throughout the evening going unnoticed, or perhaps ignored, following the earlier argument that had felt so one-sided and unjust. The realization that Albert too saw me in the light painted by my in-laws' accusations stung more than their words. Despite my disappointment, I set aside my pride. From that day forward, I took on both cooking and cleaning, adding to my already mounting stress and fatigue. As the weeks turned into months, I continued to shoulder the responsibility of being the sole breadwinner. Thankfully, the recent promotion had come with a financial boost, but the reality was that our lifestyle, especially our daughter's private schooling, couldn't be supported indefinitely on a single income. Albert's disposition towards me had grown increasingly sour, his interactions brief and often dismissive, mirroring the frustration of a child denied a coveted toy. It was time for a difficult conversation. "Albert, we need to talk about our financial situation. It's unsustainable to keep going like this on my salary alone. We have to think about the girls and their schooling," I ventured. "But you have a job. You got that promotion, remember? You're making more money now," he retorted, defensively highlighting the disparity in our financial contributions. "Yes, Albert, I'm aware, but we need to face reality. Our daughter's education is costly and we can't ignore that," I replied, striving to keep the frustration from my voice. His defensive posture softened as he noticed the tears welling in my eyes, the toll of the ongoing strain evident. I know, I'm sorry, Julia. It's just, this situation has me stressed," he conceded, his tone finally acknowledging the weight of our predicament. At that moment, the walls between us seemed to lower slightly, a mutual understanding of our shared struggles beginning to bridge the gap. The journey ahead would require both of us to navigate the challenges together, acknowledging the emotional toll while working towards a solution for the sake of our family. In our struggle, Albert acknowledged the need for action to prevent any impact on our children's lives. "You're right. I'll start looking for work tomorrow," he said with newfound resolve. However, I had a different solution in mind, one that would not require him to search far and wide for employment. Thanks to my consistent networking and positive rapport with my new boss, I was in a unique position to help Albert. Despite our preference for working at separate companies to maintain our individuality and keep our professional lives distinct from our personal relationships, desperate times called for unconventional measures. I proposed, "Actually, you might not need to look elsewhere. I think I can secure a job for you at my workplace." Yes, I had taken the initiative to arrange a job opportunity for Albert where I worked, leveraging my connections and goodwill. Our decision to work together was not made lightly, considering we valued our independence. However, given our circumstances, it seemed like a practical solution. Little did we know this decision would lead to unexpected outcomes. Months into Albert's new role, he was thriving, showing remarkable progress at the company. Then one day, he brought home news that would stun me. I've invited my mom, Abigail, and Roy over for dinner. I have some important news, he said, visibly excited. Following his request, I prepared dinner and welcomed our guests, anticipating the big reveal. During dinner, Albert announced his promotion, which was met with a chorus of cheers and happiness from everyone. Despite my initial surprise at his rapid advancement, I was caught up in the joy of his achievement and relieved to see him emerging from his previous state of despondency. Yet the celebration took an unexpected turn when Albert handed me a hotel key card. Assuming it was a thoughtful gesture for a celebratory night away from home, I expressed my gratitude, imagining how much I needed a break. But Albert's next words left me reeling. "No, it's not a hotel room for us. It's a hotel room for you." This development was as bewildering as it was shocking, a twist I hadn't anticipated, showcasing that the dynamics of our relationship and professional lives were about to enter uncharted territory. My confusion was palpable as I noticed my in-laws seemed oddly satisfied with the situation, almost as if they had meticulously planned everything leading up to this moment. "What's happening here?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Abigail took the lead, explaining that Albert had confided in them about his new job and how well he was doing. "We suggested to him," she said, considering his recent success and bonuses, that it might be time for him to reevaluate his life and choices, especially in light of our last visit. "We didn't appreciate your attitude then?" I was stunned. They were proposing, or rather, insisting, that Albert and I should take a break from each other because they believed I was mistreating him now that he was financially independent. The idea that my husband, my partner of 12 years, could entertain such a notion because of his family's malicious influence was heart-wrenching. Looking directly at Albert, my gaze filled with a mix of anger and betrayal, he quickly looked away, unable to meet my eyes. His family, on the other hand, seemed to relish the turmoil, suggesting it was for the best since Albert was now the primary earner. "So you're essentially kicking me out of our home?" I asked, incredulous. The response was cold and unyielding, emphasizing the outdated notion that the man, as the head of the household, had the final say, regardless of our joint contributions. The injustice of the situation ignited a fury within me I hadn't known I possessed. Without a word, I stormed off to pack some belongings, my emotions a turbulent mix of sadness, anger, and disbelief. I found refuge at my best friend's house, where the night was spent in tears and confusion, pondering how things had reached such a low point. However, as the initial shock began to wane, my despair transformed into determination. If they thought they could demean me and discard me so easily, they were mistaken. I decided to channel my energy into uncovering the truth behind Albert's sudden financial success and the bonuses that were news to me. My resolve hardened. This was not just about revenge, but about seeking justice for the unfairness and deceit that had been thrust upon me. The next morning, with a plan in mind, I called in sick to ensure I had the freedom to investigate without interruption. Knowing Albert would be at work given our shared employer, I returned to our house to begin my search. It didn't take long in his office to uncover startling proof of his deceit. I discovered that Albert had been embezzling funds from our company, a shocking betrayal that extended to collaboration with our new boss. The evidence was undeniable on his computer, from emails to documents outlining the illicit flow of company funds directly benefiting him. I meticulously saved every piece of incriminating data onto a USB drive, realizing the depth of their scheme. With a heavy heart, I packed more of my belongings, understanding that returning home wasn't an option in the foreseeable future. Back at my friend's house, I compiled the evidence into a compelling presentation, ready to expose the wrongdoing to our company's higher-ups and HR department. I crafted an email to call for an urgent meeting, keeping the details vague to ensure attendance, while separately informing Albert of an emergency meeting about fiscal planning. The responses came quickly, and by the next day, a meeting was set. I dressed meticulously, knowing the gravity of what I was about to do. As I entered the conference room, the weight of the moment felt both heavy and exhilarating. My husband and our boss arrived last, their faces betraying a hint of panic at the sight of the company's leadership gathered. I took control of the meeting, systematically laying out the evidence of their embezzlement. The room's atmosphere shifted from curiosity to shock, then to outrage as the reality of their actions sunk in. Albert and the boss, now visibly unnerved, faced the collective scorn of their colleagues. One executive even voiced the grim future that awaited them, suggesting jail time for their crimes. Throughout, Albert's glares cut through me, his eyes filled with anger and betrayal. Yet, despite the personal turmoil, I stood firm, driven by a sense of justice for the company and myself. This moment wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposing the truth and standing up against deceit and manipulation, no matter the personal cost. Matching Albert's glare of anger with my expression of determination and scorn, I pressed on, revealing more damning evidence against him. His reaction was explosive. "You're deceiving everyone. She's a liar," he shouted, threatening legal action and divorce, vowing to destroy me. The man I once knew had vanished, leaving behind someone unrecognizable, driven by greed and desperation. As he tried to storm out, he was met by security guards I had wisely stationed outside the door, having anticipated his potential reaction to being exposed. My foresight paid off as Albert found his path blocked, his attempts to push past them futile. Meanwhile, our boss, equally complicit in the scheme, could only lament the ruin of his life. After presenting all the evidence I had gathered, the outcome was inevitable. Both Albert and our boss were dismissed from their positions and faced legal charges for embezzling funds. Their departure from the building was met with a media storm, which I had orchestrated by tipping off journalists and news outlets, eager to document their downfall. The image of Albert captured in the media's glare and splashed across the next day's newspaper was a vindication of sorts. His journey from the office to a jail cell, struggling to post bail while under investigation, was a stark testament to his actions' consequences. Moreover, the unfolding investigation suggested that the scheme's roots ran deeper, implicating my brother-in-law Roy, who had provided IT support for their illicit activities. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, explaining my in-laws' eagerness to oust me from my home. They weren't just dismissing me out of disdain, they were removing an obstacle to their criminal enterprise. The revelation that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law might also be involved added another layer of betrayal to the ordeal. With Roy likely facing a future similar to Albert's, the extent of their familial conspiracy was laid bare. Their collective downfall was a harsh but necessary consequence of their actions, marking a turning point in uncovering and addressing the full scope of their deceit and embezzlement. In the wake of these revelations, I can't help but sense the panic that must be coursing through my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. They know it's only a matter of time before their involvement comes to light. These recent months have been a whirlwind, yet I find myself grateful for unearthing such critical information when I did, preventing even more damage. My actions in exposing this deception, including that of my husband and his conniving family, have not gone unnoticed. in an unexpected turn of events, my company's leadership reviewed my contributions and, recognizing my diligence and achievements, offered me a significant promotion. I'm stepping into my former boss's role, a position that not only acknowledges my efforts but also comes with a considerable pay increase and bonuses. I'm thrilled to start this new chapter next week. The next logical step for me is initiating divorce proceedings. Staying married to someone embroiled in criminal activities is out of the question. I'm confident that the custody of our children won't be a contentious issue. Given my stable financial situation, maternal status, and untarnished legal record, in contrast to the crimes and betrayals of their father, the path seems clear. I'm genuinely excited about what lies ahead. This new beginning marks a significant shift in my life, one filled with promise and devoid of the deceit that clouded my recent past. It's a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and in this case, it appears everyone is receiving their just deserts.